Hello, my name is Sheila Giffen, and I've been asked to speak to you about my experience of tithing. My in-laws always tithe. It was something my husband and I wanted to do, but with raising kids and bills, it was just something one of these days we'll do it. I decided that after going to the financial university meetings they had here at church that I think I could maybe do that one of these days. And the Lord spoke to my heart, was like, you need to do this now. I'm like, oh, like I'm retired, I got bills, I can't do this. And so I went to the Bible, I went to Malachi, I was reading through that, and in there God says, test me. When I was always raised, you don't test God. But he said, test me to see if I keep my promises. So I said, okay, I'm going to test you. And I tithe. I wrote the check, put it in the collection box. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. A couple weeks after that, I got a letter from Suddenlink, and I was like, I paid my bill. What could this possibly be about? I opened it up. It was a gift card. And it said, call the number to see how much you have. And I was thinking, $10, $15, I'll treat myself to lunch. So I called, and it was a $50 gift card. I'm like, good, treat myself to lunch and gas in my car, perfect. Then my gas bill had been extremely high through the winter, and we heat our house. I have a little burner in the garage, and I have gas in a building we have, and I'm like walking around with sweatshirts and blankets trying to cut my gas bill down. And I kept getting these phone calls from these companies wanting me to switch my gas carrier. And I'm like, that just didn't seem on the up and up. So I called my gas company. I said, are you making these phone calls? And they said, no, we don't do that. We send you a letter. And I said, okay. But she said, while you're on the phone, let me check your supplier. She came back and she said, oh my gosh, you're paying the highest rate we have. You're on a variable. She said, let me change your supplier and we'll get you on the lowest one we have. I'm like, great, that's awesome. So the next month I tithe, my gas bill comes and I'm holding it. I'm like, oh, please be $50 less. I open it up, it was $160 less than the month before. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. Then I started getting more phone calls to sub, so I was pulling in more work there. I went and filled out my income tax, and this year I got money back, which was a big surprise because I always have to pay. God is good. He keeps his promises. He will take care of you each and every month if you just trust him. Put him first, and he will open the gates of heaven and bless you beyond measure.
Thank you. Thank you to Sheila for being willing to tell that story. She's right about that. God is more than able to supply for all of your needs. You're going to hear a lot more about that in today's message. I'm going to tell a story myself in a few minutes in our message that we did not intentionally line the message up with Sheila's video. It kind of worked out that way on accident. I like to think the Spirit of God might have been working something out. You'll get it when you hear the story. But I want you to trust God. We ask you to give here, and we're going to do that without apology, because we do believe in the biblical expectation of tithing, that the people of God should take a tenth of what is given to them and give it back to the kingdom of heaven. And I know that is scary. I know that's scary. But what we're going to talk today about in our message is getting out from behind the wall of trust and learning to trust a God who can provide for every little bit of our needs. And so we're going to give. Would you be generous toward the kingdom of heaven? While you give, would you just envision for a moment that when you give, that you are sending that giving right up into the kingdom, right into the throne room of God. He's sending it right back down to our church to be able to use for ministry and mission in this community. If you can't give in our physical baskets, you can give on our app. It's the easiest way to do so. Just download our Church On app. There's instructions on how to do that on the back of your worship guides. And just hit the give button. It's the simplest way to be able to give to God's work through this church. Let's just pray for the offering. Lord Jesus, do your great and mighty work in us. Help us to trust you with everything. Thank you, God, for Sheila's story. Would you continue to use that and many other stories in our lives? Amen. Let's turn our eyes to the screen.
If there's a concrete wall in front of you, go through it. this walk.
Well, before we get fully into the message this morning, I want to make sure you all understand what's happening next weekend with Serve Day. I am super excited about Serve Day as a church. Serve Day is a national event that churches in our church planting movement participate in. So we had a national movement called ARC, stands for the Association of Related Churches. They helped to plant us to be able to do this work here in Marietta. And churches all over the United States that are in the ARC church planting movement go out and serve in their community for one of their Sundays in the summer. They kind of give their time and their energy away to show the city their love for them. Sometimes the church has a bit of an antagonistic relationship with the city it's in. We don't want to be that way. We want to love our city, give back to our city, be a life-giving presence in this community. And so next weekend, we would love to have you come and join us. We will not have services. What we will do is come here at 8:15 in the morning. We'll have kind of one worship song, kind of a short rally together, and then we're deploying teams out into the city. Reno Community Center, Hadley Field, the local schools. There's a whole bunch of opportunities for you to serve in. If you have not signed up yet, tonight is the absolute deadline to sign up. We are only going to take on the serving opportunities that we have enough volunteers for. We'll cancel the rest. So we have a whole bunch of opportunities. We're going to see what you sign up for and say, I want to do that one. Please tell us by 9 o'clock tonight. When you served on Easter, many of you served on our Easter crew this year, you were given a t-shirt that said like Pathway Community Church on the front and said volunteer on the back. Wear those shirts if you could, just so we can kind of be identifiable to our community so they understand who it is that's serving them. And if you want one of those shirts, if you don't have one, if you sign up by tonight, we can still get you one. We still have time. We're putting in an order on Monday morning for them. They'll cost $7 to do. I wish we had the resources to be able to just get them for you. We don't at this time, so it'll be $7 to get a t-shirt. But you can serve without being in it. Just don't serve shirtless, okay? All right, all you manly men walking around with your six-packs, humiliating the rest of us. It's going to be an awesome Sunday. So go ahead and sign up tonight. The last thing would be this. If you have young kids, we would love for you to take your whole family to serve with you. We really want this to be an all-family experience so your kids can see what happens as you kind of give away your faith to this community. We want your kids to witness that. So even if you have very young kids, bring them with you. Sign up for one of the opportunities that has a local park. So a lot of them, the community center, Reno Community Center, Hadley Field, all the schools, those have parks on them. We're going to have some volunteers who will be on the park, managing the chaos of the kids, keeping the kids safe while you're serving. So this is an all-family-in experience together. Shoot some photos, shoot some selfies, tell your story on Facebook, tag our Facebook page, let us know what you did. It's going to be awesome. All right, well today we are kicking off week number 4 of a series we're calling Walls. And in this series we've been identifying all the walls that get in our way. We have things that stand in our way that prevent us from saying yes to God. We've talked about the wall of waiting. We've talked about the wall of qualification. We've talked about last weekend the wall of our past. And we've been looking at Joshua's story in the Old Testament to see the kind of walls that Joshua had to overcome in his life and his journey and how they relate to us. And today we come to a story where Joshua had to get through what I really think is the most prominent and difficult wall for any of us to overcome, and it's the wall of trust. We're going to read all about that in a few minutes. But let me just ask you, have you ever had a moment when God spoke something to you and you struggled to trust God and believe that He would be there for you if you said yes to whatever it was He asked you to do? You know, God speaks in a multitude of ways. And if you're a follower of Jesus, what you're going to discover is that God will speak to you. He knows how to speak in a way that you're going to hear it. He knows how to do that. Sometimes you'll read your Bible and you'll open up to a passage that you did not anticipate was going to crush you in some way, and something will just fly off the page and hit you, and you will know right in that moment, this is God speaking to me, and He's speaking to me about this situation. You'll know exactly what it is, because the Holy Spirit is not unfamiliar with how to speak to you. Sometimes God will put words in the mouth of a friend, somebody who's a brother, sister in Christ, who's going to come to you and say, I feel like there's something I'm supposed to say to you. And they're going to say it, and you're going to know exactly what it applies to in your life. And you're going to know God is speaking to me. Sometimes you'll be in a moment of prayer, and just in prayer, you'll hear the voice of God. Now, I have multiple friends who have heard the audible voice of God at different times in their journey and in their life. I never have. God maybe will speak to you in an audible way. Maybe he'll just speak to you so loudly in your heart that you can't deny. You know it's God. You could be in a worship service and you're just worshiping here at church, and all of a sudden just something clicks and you just know God's speaking to me right now. God has all kinds of ways to speak. And when he speaks, he's going to give you direction and instruction on your life. The direction could be a start doing something. The direction could be a stop doing something. Cut this behavior off. Cut this attitude off. The direction could be extend forgiveness where you don't want it. Have the hard conversation where you don't necessarily want to do it. The direction could be something like what Sheila heard from God. It's time to start giving. The direction could be something like you're in an abusive situation. It's time to leave that marriage. The direction could be something like, I know you want out of that marriage, but it's not time. Stay. You see, God has all kinds of ways to speak, and he'll give direction on different kinds of things. And every time God gives a direction on something, the most common wall we are going to get stuck behind is what I call the wall of trust. We get log jammed, we get jammed up right here and say, God, if I'm obedient, if I do exactly what you tell me to do right now, will you be there on the other side of this to catch me? If things fall apart, if things crumble, will you be there? God, can I trust you? And this is a wall that if you haven't hit it already, you're going to hit it again and again and again in your life. I think the wall of trust is the hardest wall to get through. I think it's the most prominent wall. I think it's the biggest wall. I think it is our biggest challenge as believers, that we say yes to following Jesus, and then Jesus starts asking things of us, and it scares us, and it terrifies us, and we get locked up behind the wall of trust. Well, I need to tell you something this morning. There is only one way around the wall of trust. God has one and only one way that we get over, through, around the wall of trust. And it's obedience. I hate to break it to you, but there's no other way. God's path of taking down the wall of trust in your life is to do what he says and to watch him supply on the other side of doing what he says. And this kind of brings me to my big idea this morning. You need to understand this, that God always meets us on the other side of our obedience. That when we're obedient, when we say yes to God, when we do exactly what God asked us to do, told us to do, God always meets us on the other side of obedience. And that's how the wall of trust comes down, because we watch him provide and we realize we can trust God. But there's no way through and around and over this wall without obedience. It doesn't exist. Obedience is God's plan to take the wall of trust down. Well, I want to share with you a story this morning that I've been sitting on for 3 years and wondering when God was going to give me the green light to share this. I got on Facebook Live this week. I don't know how many of you saw that, and just told you I was going to tell a very personal story today. I want to tell you a story of the time that I learned in my life that I could trust God. You know, all of us have those top 3, 4, 5 stories of a time when God showed up in a way that was totally unbelievable, just were like life-altering experiences. And I had one of those when I got stuck behind the wall of trust one time as a young man coming out of college. And the reason I haven't told this story before is because I've always been fearful that if I ever told it, that it would communicate in an arrogant way, that it would communicate in a spiritually prideful way. And I promise you, that is not my heart and my spirit behind this. I want you to hear what God did in my life. So when I came out of college, I came out of Penn State University. I know that makes me, like the devil around here, right? All you Ohio State fans. I am a big Nittany Lion fan, forgive me. Came out of Penn State, I had an engineering degree. And God, in the middle of my college years, had called me into ministry. Now, I said yes early on to that and stuck out the degree and finished it to the very end. But it really hit me when I got to the end of that and I finally graduated and I was watching my friends get some really nice paying jobs coming out of school. I mean, all the guys, everybody was sharing their opening salary, what they were getting, what they got hired to do. And it was, and I had said yes to God to go into ministry, and God had led me to a campus ministry organization, and I was going to go to California University of Pennsylvania. My starting salary was going to be $22,000. And my engineering buddies were all making way more money than that in their opening jobs. But in the campus ministry world, it's kind of funny when you become a missionary, which is essentially what you're doing in campus ministry. You're a missionary to a campus. You have to raise all the support. And if you don't raise it, you don't get paid it. So they set your salary at $22,000, and then they say to you, now you got to get all the donors to pay for that. If you don't get the donors to pay for it, you get paid whatever's come in. You don't get paid the full amount. So if $15,000 comes in the first year, your salary is $15,000 for the first year. That's the way it works. Now I knew that going in because God had given a clear call to campus ministry. Well, when I started with this organization in the summer of 2004, they moved us into Geneva College. And for 8 weeks, we went on this campus right here, and we had to be trained in how to do campus ministry. This is actually where I met my wife. It's where our love story started together after our college years were finished. And when I went to Geneva, the very first thing they taught us, the very first thing was how to raise money, because everybody's worried, how in the heck am I going to get paid in this new job? So they teach you all about raising up donors, getting people onto your team. Well, I started asking people, and you have to, when you raise support, you've got to ask like your friends, your family members, your college roommates, people you went to high school with that you haven't seen in a number of years, old sports coaches, friends of your parents. You ask everybody to come onto your team. And I started doing that. And I had a deep check in my spirit because here I was asking people to give to my new ministry in college ministry, and I was not a giver myself at all. One time in my life, I was at a youth camp, and they took an offering, and I dropped a $5 bill in the offering. That was the extent of my lifetime giving. I was a lifetime $5 donor. That's pretty awful. I didn't give anything to the kingdom of heaven. And I knew the biblical precedent. I came up from this high in the church. I knew the biblical precedent about tithing. I had read the same verses in Malachi that Sheila just told you that she read that convicted her. I knew that God's expectation was that as followers of Christ, we take a tenth of all the money. We're supposed to view all the money we have as money given to us by God. We take a tenth and give it back to Him for the purposes of ministry. I knew that. I was not practicing it, and I was hypocritical. And so one night I took a walk on Geneva's campus. I took a very long walk, and I prayed. I said, God, what is my number? What is my percentage? Now, in my heart of hearts, I kid you not, I was hoping for the ministry discount from God, okay? Because I thought, I've given you my career, God. I could have made a lot more money in another field. Can I get a discount? Is it 2%, 3% for me? Like, come on, help me out here. I don't even have the donors to get paid any of this money I'm supposed to get paid. I took a long, long walk, and I kept asking and asking and asking that question. And I finally sat down on the bench and said, I'm going to stop asking the question. Lord, you know my question. I'm just going to be quiet. Would you speak? I sat there on a bench real quiet for a while. And then I heard God speak. I didn't hear him audibly, but I heard him so loud in my spirit that it was undeniable. I heard two words, 30%. I'm not kidding you. That's what I heard from God. And I heard it so loud that it was undeniable. There was no way to walk that moment back. I had heard God. I almost fell off of that bench and threw up all over the ground. Because I said, God, there is no way. There is no way. God, clearly you don't understand how I'm getting paid in this new ministry. I don't have donors on my team yet. I've got to pay for rent. I've got a car payment, God. There is no way. I've got to put food on my table. And I wrestled with God that night when I heard that. I wrestled with God that night. And finally, after a long night of wrestling, I came to a point of submission. I said, God, I can't walk back what I've heard from you. I asked you, you spoke, you made it clear. Okay. But if I can't pay for my rent, God, that's on you. If my car gets repossessed, that's on you. That's not on me. And I went to bed that night. Now, I'm going to tell you the rest of that story at the end of this message. I'm going to leave you in a little bit of suspense for a few minutes. But you have to understand that in your journey with God, you will come across moments like this. You will have moments when God speaks to you. Sometimes you're going to ask him to speak, and he'll honor that. Sometimes you're not going to ask him to speak, and he's speaking anyway because he knows what's best for you. And there will be times that his voice is easy for you and pleasant to you and joyful to you, and there will be times that his voice is very hard for you. because he convicts you of something. He says to start something that scares the heck out of you. And I'm telling you, every time it happens, you will run right behind the wall of trust and you will say, God, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Are you trustworthy? This is exactly where I went. This is exactly where you'll go. And what we're going to see this morning is it's exactly where Joshua went. Joshua is the new leader of the Israelites. We've been looking at his story these last few weekends. He's taken over from Moses. Moses has led the Israelites for 40 years. He led them out of slavery in Egypt. He led them through the Red Sea. He led them in the desert and in the wilderness. And we come up at the beginning of the 6th book of our Bible, the book of Joshua, and we find the Israelites camped on the east side of the Jordan River. Joshua is the new leader. In chapter 1, we talked about how God established him as the new leader. Moses had died, so the only leader the Israelites had ever known is gone. Joshua's the new guy. He's got to take the Israelites across the Jordan River and go in and fight enemies that are much more fortified, much bigger, much stronger than they are. That's his task as a new leader. The first 2 chapters of the book of Joshua all play out in about a 4-day time span. They get to the east side of the Jordan River. Joshua gets an assignment from God. Joshua immediately sends the spies across the river into Jericho. They stay in the home of a prostitute named Rahab. We talked all about that last week. They come back from that experience, and they tell Joshua, God is going to give Jericho into our hands. Joshua is now emboldened as a leader, and he's ready to make his first major move as a leader in front of what is probably a couple million people. He's ready to take his first big step as a leader. And he's going to get behind the wall of trust. Here's what happens. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. So Joshua begins making his first major, bold leadership move. And he sends the officers and the priests to get the Ark of the Covenant. The officers go out in the camp, and they say the Ark of the Covenant is going to move toward the Jordan River. When you see the Ark of the Covenant go, we want you to follow it. The Levitical priests come in, and they put the Ark up on their shoulders, and they begin to march the Ark toward the Jordan River. Now, to understand the significance of this, you just need a little bit of historical background to get what's going on here. In Moses' day, Moses used this thing called the tabernacle and the ark in his leadership. In Exodus, I believe it's chapter 25, God gave super specific instructions to Moses on how to build something called the tabernacle. And the instructions were so specific that we can kind of rebuild what we think the tabernacle looked like in modern day. Here's a picture of somebody recreating the tabernacle. The tabernacle is basically a mobile church for the Israelites. It's how they worship God. Whenever the Israelites would move, remember the pillar of fire by day and the the cloud by day and the fire by night would lead the Israelites. They'd follow wherever God led them. They would pick up the tabernacle, they'd pack it all up, they'd take it with them, they'd follow wherever God set them down. They'd sit down, they'd reset the tabernacle, and that was where they did their worshiping. It's where they made some sacrifices, it's where they tried to hear God, it's where their disputes were settled. They would send Moses into this tent that's inside it to try to listen to God. Now, the tent had inside of it 2 divisions to it. There was what was called the holy place and the most holy place. And the most holy place at the back of the tent was a spot that nobody went into except for Moses. Now, we're not entirely sure if nobody else ever went into the most holy place, but we do know that Moses would go there. And the most holy place would house the Ark of the Covenant. And this is a modern-day recreation of what we think the Ark might have looked like. Because once again, God gave super specific instructions on how to build the ark. The ark was a 4-foot by 2.5-foot deep by 2.5-foot wide box with big wooden poles that went through it. Everything is covered in gold, and on the top of the box are these golden cherubim, which are like winged angels. And God promised Moses that when he spoke, he would speak from between the cherubim. So Moses would go into the Holy of Holies and hear from God. When Moses would come out, his face would be glowing. And he would scare the heck out of all the children. So they literally put a veil over his face because he scared everybody. I mean, imagine somebody comes out of the tent, face glow going on. It's weird. But this is what happened. So Moses had to wear a veil all the time. Well, Moses is now dead. He's gone. Joshua's the new leader. And Joshua knows that God always used the ark in his communication with Moses. And so Joshua orders the ark to go forward. The ark housed the 10 Commandments inside of it. It represented the presence of God. Now we know that God can't be contained in a box, right? But the ark represented his presence. So he orders them to take the ark down toward the river. And Joshua gets very bold and gutsy at this moment. He's feeling kind of like, okay, God's going to do this. God's going to get us across the Jordan. God's going to take us into Jericho. He's feeling this sense of energy behind him. And he stands up in a really gutsy move. And he says this, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Now, he gets up and he kind of is like, come on, consecrate yourselves. That is, make yourself holy. Get yourself ready. God's going to move. Tomorrow, he gives a timeline. Tomorrow, you're going to see God do something great. Now, I can tell you, as somebody who stands in front of people and occasionally gives a rally cry to try to do something, that when you do this as a leader, it doesn't matter how bold you seem in public. Internally, you are quaking in your boots. Because you don't actually know if what you're proclaiming is going to happen. Last year, just an example from my own leadership, I stood up about this time of year. We were doing 21 days of prayer, and we said, we're going to reach 1,000 people at Easter next Sunday. I don't know if you remember that. And internally, I was shaking because I didn't know if it was actually going to happen. And Joshua had one of these moments. And he stands up, we're crossing the Jordan, we're taking Jericho. But I'm telling you, internally, he's shaking. But he doesn't show it to everybody. And he says this, Joshua said to the priests, take the Ark of the Covenant, pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and they went on ahead of them. Now Joshua, I'm just telling you, at this moment, is behind the wall of trust. And he's saying, God, I'm trying to lead these people. You've given me this new mantle of leadership. Can I trust you to be there at the Jordan River? And God somehow speaks to Joshua. I don't know if God spoke through the ark. I don't know if God spoke audibly. I don't know how God spoke to him. But these words are recorded to have been spoken to Joshua. And the Lord said to Joshua at this moment, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. So God gives us comfort. I'm going to be with you, Joshua. Trust me. And now God gives an extremely specific instruction to Joshua. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. Now Joshua has just heard the voice of God, a voice that you're going to hear at some point on your journey, a voice that I heard on a bench in Geneva College, and God gave an instruction. And the instruction was, take the priests who are carrying that ark up on their shoulders, take them right down into the water. Make sure they stand in the water. They cannot stand on the water's edge. Stand in the water. So the priests would have walked right down and come right down into the edge of the water, just like this. And Joshua has no guarantee that anything is going to happen at this moment. I'm telling you, he's behind the wall of trust and wondering this question, God, are you going to humiliate me in front of everybody? I'm doing exactly what you said. He sends them down into the water. Listen to me, Pathway. The only way around, through, over the wall of trust is to be obedient. It is the only way. There's no other path to tear down the wall of trust than to be obedient when you hear the voice of God. And Joshua listened to God. He chose obedience. And he chose and he trusted that God was going to be there for him. Verse 14, so when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went on ahead of them. Now, verse 15, the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. Don't miss that detail. You know what flood stage looks like. You live in the convergence of two rivers in Marietta, Ohio. You've been around floods. I did not grow up around floods. I did not understand what a flood was like until I came here. And I saw County Road 9 get cut off and realized if I drive my car on County Road 9, my entire car will be submerged. That's flood stage. You've been around flood stage waters. The Jordan is in the springtime. The waters are up. Okay, that's a significant detail. They're trying to show you the significance of what God is about to do here. The priests go right down into the edge of the water. They're exactly obedient to what God asked them to do. Here's what happened. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan, and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam, the poor residents of the city of Adam. They got all the water in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Verse 17, the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Joshua discovered that God always meets us on the other side of obedience. There is no way around the wall of trust. There is no way through the wall of trust without obedience. Joshua discovered that God always meets us on the other side of obedience. When we are obedient to the voice of God, God shows up. He's there. If God tells you to stop something, you need to trust that He'll be there. If God tells you to start something, you need to trust that He'll be there. If God calls you to give something, you need to trust that He'll be there. If God calls you to forgive someone, you need to trust that He'll be there. If God calls you into the hard conversation, you need to trust that He'll be there. God will be there. God is there in every risky situation He calls you to, but He's on the other side of the obedient decision. And the reason He's on the other side and not the front side of the obedient decision is because He needs your obedience to help you to tear down the wall of trust. He's going to use your obedient decision. He's going to use your yes to tear down the wall. You've got to be obedient. And Joshua discovered that. Sheila, who you just heard from a few minutes ago, discovered that. Many of you have discovered that. And I discovered that at Geneva College. I was sitting on a bench outside of Geneva saying yes to God, having absolutely no idea. God, I do not see a path to give 30% away. I don't see it. The numbers don't add up. It makes 0 sense. 0 cents. I don't have to be a math major to know. The numbers don't add up right here. I go to bed that night, and I am not making this story up. This is exactly what happened. The next morning, I wake up, I have breakfast, and my phone rings. And I get a call from a professor at California University of Pennsylvania named Dan Engstrom. This is Dan right here. Dan became a great friend. Dan was a Christian professor at that campus. And he had been involved in my interview process to go and be at that campus. And he called me and he said, Ryan, we're really excited to get you here on campus to start working with these college students. He said, I have something I want to offer to you. He said, there's a family in our church named Jack and Nancy Jolly. And Nancy's mom has recently passed away. Nancy and her sisters don't know what to do with her mom's house and possessions. It's too emotionally close right now. They're not ready to make decisions about what to do with the house. They approached me and wanted to know if you would stay in the house. They don't want you to pay any rent. They don't want you to pay any utilities. They just want you to be in the house to make sure it's okay while they take time to process their mom's loss. He said, do you want it? The house was 20 minutes off campus. I didn't care. I'm like, I'm taking it. Free housing? Are you kidding me? Yes. Literally the next morning, after saying yes to God, I found that God showed up on the other side of an obedient decision. God always meets us on the other side of obedience. Always. All the time. I go into that house, and during that first semester, God started bringing donors onto our team. More people started jumping on and kind of building up a support base. But the amount of money that was coming in, it wasn't very much. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money. But I was faithful with it. And I would take a tenth of it, I'd give it to my local church. Another tenth would go to other friends who were in ministry like me. And another tenth would go to people who were in need. That's how the 30% went out. And I just was faithful in those first few months. I get through that first semester on campus. I come to the very end of it, and Nancy and her sisters are now ready to make a decision about the house. So they contacted me, and they said, hey, listen, in about a month and a half, we're going to need you out. We are going to sell the house now. We're ready to make some decisions. Right about that time that I get that communication from Nancy Jolly, I get another phone call. This one comes in from a dentist in town. This dentist is a Christian man. He has a daughter who's a senior at California University. His daughter had been living in an apartment 3 blocks off campus. And he said to me, my daughter is graduating in a few weeks. He said, I love what you're doing. I love your ministry. I want to help you. He said, would you come in and take our apartment? Here's the deal. I don't want to charge you any rent. I don't want to charge you any utilities. This apartment is 3 blocks off campus. Do you want it? Yes. Listen, that little measly little apartment is where Janet and I got married. It's where our first baby came along, and we did a lot of ministry out of that house. But what I want to tell you is for 3.5 years, I didn't pay a rent payment. I didn't pay a utility payment. I sat down one time and I added up, based on that salary, what was the little bit that I gave away. And it, kind of added up to this. I don't remember the exact number. And then I added up one time, what should I have been paying in rent? Like, what were the going rent numbers? And it wasn't even close. The amount of money that I did not pay for housing so overwhelmed the little bit I had given away. I could not believe it. It was mind-blowing. And I got to tell you that the wall of trust ripped down in my life. It ripped down in my life. And I realized that I could trust God. And that has stuck with me all throughout this journey of ministry ever since. That has never gone away. Every decision we've made from that point forward, we've been able to step forward, even when it's scary, and say, God, this is really scary, but man, I can remember what you did back then. And trust has been able to lead us. But it took an obedient decision to get there. Now, before you all think I'm more holy and super spiritual than I am, here's the reality. After 3.5 years, we were married, we were having babies, we started thinking about things like college fund and savings and all this kind of stuff and getting out of debt, and we did cut our giving back. Now, we've always been a tithing family. In fact, we've always been beyond a tithing family. We've always given our tithe and extra since that point forward. But I'm not sure, even to this day, I'm not sure if we made the right decision by cutting that giving back. I will tell you that the first time I paid a rent payment in my life was when we stopped giving 30%. That should tell you something. But beyond that journey for the next 15 years, I got to tell you, I have watched again and again and again God show up. I don't have time to tell you the stories. I could be here for an hour and tell you financial stories. I'll tell them someday in other messages. They're crazy. They're crazy. The things that God did and the ways that he provided. But the wall of trust came down. And it needs to come down for you. Now, I need you to know, I didn't coordinate this message with Sheila's story. That kind of was an accident that these two things went on the same Sunday, which leads me to believe that maybe the Holy Spirit's working on you in some kind of way. But I need you to know you can trust God. And I don't know where you need to trust him. I don't know if it's with your money. I don't know if it's with your time and your energy. I don't know if it's something in your marriage or if it's something with your business or it's a big risk or a new venture or a new opportunity. I don't know where it is, but God's voice is probably coming in your life somewhere. And there's a struggle to be obedient. And I'm just telling you, trust God. Be obedient. God will always meet you on the other side of obedience. He is there. He is there. Let's take a moment to bow our heads and pray. I think God has some work to do in your heart today.